Big 12 still open for business. Well, it looks like Brett Yormark made it very clear in his Florida State and Clemson joining. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Charge On. As always, I'm your host, Sean Green. Before we get started, as always, a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet online, the game starts here. We have a lot to get to today. Nick Geddes, how we doing?
I am doing great, and things like media days going on in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas get you a little excited for what's going on. The season's almost here, so there's a lot of excitement to be about. And I guess as for media days, for better or worse, Sean, the face of the league resides in Boulder, Colorado, and he's a head coach. So, again, for better or worse, that is certainly the. I think that's my main takeaway from the Big 12 meetings. I barely saw anything else from any other team or coach or player, anything, but it was Dion, other than the Mike Gundy nonsense.
Yeah.
My goodness. Other than that, it's like everything else was a footnote. So take that with what you will, but definitely exciting times.
That's probably why the one thing we are talking about from Big 12 Media Day is happening towards the end of our show. Not really towards the end, towards the middle, about the whole Florida State, Clemson debacle coming to the Big 12 potentially. Because media days, Nick, have turned into this, we're just ready for the season. Like, get the coaches in front of the camera, let them talk about their teams. You kind of already have an idea of where the teams are and how they're going to shape up. But listen, like I've said, we've heard Gus Malzahn speak for going on our fourth year now. We know what he's going to say. We know the talking points. I think I watched maybe 5 to 10 different interviews that he did on Wednesday, and it was very much the same stuff. So, and hey, Deion Sanders gave Gus Malzahn a good shout out. So
he did.
We'll take it.
And he took off the glasses to say it too,
and he mentioned it multiple times. And again, I said it. That's my bad. With him recruiting Shedeur and the Auburn connection and all that stuff, it made it very interesting to see that Deion was making it known that he's had a lot of love from the Big 12 coaches and that he hadn't received that from other places, the Pac-12. So it's definitely very interesting. But yeah, the Big 12 Media Day was basically Colorado. Let's boast about Colorado. So we're not really going to get into much of Big 12 Media Day. What we will get into is a couple things. We're going to get into UCF recruiting. Got a big-time recruit yesterday. We're going to talk about the Florida State Clemson stuff. But I first wanted to mention, we're already 4 minutes into this, wanted to first mention new series dropping next Wednesday. I know I'm very excited. Nick's very excited. We're excited to be bringing it to the channel. Got a lot of exciting stuff in the works for the UCF Dynasty series. I'm just excited to play it. It's going to be interesting. I'm literally going to put the game in and start recording this whole thing. We're pretty much ready to go. The schedule, I know a lot of people were asking me about when it's going to be posted, all that stuff. First episode's dropping next Wednesday. That's for a fact. The goal is to play this UCF season up until the opener. So for the next month, it's about 13, 14, 15 episodes. You probably get about 2 episodes a week with that Dynasty series, more if it goes well. But we're going to be playing the season up until the season opener. So you'll get a podcast every week and then a couple UCF Dynasty series episodes every single week. And we got exciting stuff. We're trying to bring some people on. We're going to be trying to start an online Dynasty league with you guys. So a lot of exciting stuff, but please subscribe and get ready for that because it's really excited to bring that to the channel. All right, let's get down to brass tacks. Nick, it's only July 12th, and the booms have been crazy. The month of July so far has been great for UCF. I think so far now it's 8 commits in the month of July, so only 2 weeks in. Obviously, we got 2 since we last talked last week. I went through all of the commits over the first week of July on last episode, so go check that out. But we've got actually a couple, 3 new commits. We'll start with the first one, Cameron White. Down in your neck of the woods, Nick. Cameron White, linebacker. Again, UCF really likes. He looks a lot to me the way he plays like Troy Ford, which is another, again, UCF commit from a year or two ago. UCF kind of likes these type of linebackers, really fast, playmaking ability, which again, UCF kind of needs. So, the school he's going to. He transferred, but he's from the Tampa area. UCF's just loving Tampa the last couple years, huh?
I mean, it's a hotbed I think it's a hotbed for a lot of players. And, I think to an extent, Gus has talked a lot about sort of putting what's the words he used now? I can't even remember. The thing around Orlando. How did he phrase it before?
Oh gosh, I should know since we literally hear him say it every 2 seconds.
He says it all the time. I don't know why I can't even think about the buzzword that he uses for it.
We'll just say put the fence.
Yeah, just perimeter, fence, whatever words you want to use. That's really bugging me right now, actually, that I can't remember that. Really bugging me. But my point being is that he's talked so much about that, of cornering that Orlando market. And I think he's done a good job to that to an extent. I definitely think there's a lot more room for growth, though. But, clearly Tampa is a hotbed as well. We know there's a lot of competition, but from the school that plays their football in Tampa, we know that they're not getting some of these guys. So I think it definitely makes a lot of sense for UCF to get involved, and you're starting to see that now.
Now I'm going to get sidetracked. Did you see the reporter when Gus was at Big 12 Media Day that the first question he asked was about recruiting, and he mentioned USF and USF, XYZ. And Gus Malzahn made it very clear. He goes, we recruit against Florida, Florida State, and Miami. That's who we're up against. I thought you should go back. I don't think you probably saw it. You have to go and watch it because it's actually hilarious. He's
he's not lying. What I said was not meant to even be shade, to be honest with you. But
I know there's not. There are levels to this.
There are levels to college football right now.
Yeah, there are levels.
And I'd much rather be competing against those schools, no doubt about it, than
100%.
Than that one.
Big time commit on the 6th. This was a day after I recorded. I knew it was coming. We always have to post on Fridays in the off season, so I couldn't really say anything. But Christian Hudson, big time defensive lineman. Coach Martin, it seems like every single cycle just gets one of these top tier defensive linemen from Daytona Beach. Again, local kid, one of the top 40 at his position. In my opinion, one of the best defensive linemen in the class. So again, when you talk about a coach like Kenny Martin, Nick, to get a guy like John Walker last season, to get a couple guys basically towards the end of November to commit to UCF, and when we were talking about defensive coordinators, I was like, you want to make him the DC because you want to keep him on staff. He's one of your best recruiters. He's still here. We love to have him here, and he gets another one in Christian Hudson. Yeah,
for a 3-star, definitely a big get there. You had mentioned it. They were able to land him over Iowa, which we know that Iowa known for defense. So anytime you get a guy over them, that's a big one. Obviously, a guy who's local-ish. They're from Daytona. So, yeah, Kenny Martin's been doing a really good job building that defensive line, and we've talked about it, the need for UCF to continue to beef up in the trenches, and I think you're starting to see that in this class. It's starting to take shape.
No, for sure. And again, the class just keeps getting better. Let's get to the one that happened yesterday. It's one that we've been expecting. Big time ad. Chaston Brown, offensive tackle from Georgia. Again, UCF has been loving the Georgia, basically Atlanta area. If you go based off of the 247 composite, Chaston Brown is the highest rated or ranked offensive lineman in program history. It's on multiple recruiting sites. They have his height wrong. He's 6'9", and he's still growing. I know on Rivals they have him 6'8", on 3. Nick, I don't know what you guys have him on 3 height-wise. I know it's pennies here at this point, 6'7", 6'8", 6'9".
Yeah, he's listed as 6'7" and on 3.
Yeah, he's 6'9", and he's still growing. Rated as a 4-star practically on every single site. This is a huge kid. And when we talk, Nick, we talked about it a couple weeks ago. We were talking about recruiting and how UCF is making an emphasis on recruiting offensive linemen, and it looks like they're basically building an offensive line. And I said, it's looking like this guy's going to commit. He committed yesterday. How big? One of the top offensive tackles in the country for this class. You've now got 4 offensive linemen committed to this class specifically. I mean, that's how you build it, right? I think a lot of schools are seeing the issues in going to the transfer portal and just playing year by year. Baylor, Coach Aranda was talking about it, how they played their young guys maybe a little too soon last year, so they went into the transfer portal this year. But I think they're going to see the problems with that because the transfer portal is not made equal when it comes to offensive linemen specifically.
Yeah, I mean, you had guys like in the high end, was it Caden Proctor, who had gone into the portal? I believe he went right back to Alabama, did he not? He flipped to Iowa and then he went right back to Alabama. So he can't even really, I don't know if I even call that a portal edition, but yeah, I think for the most part, if you're trying to get those blue chip offensive linemen, they're going to be the guys that you recruit, and you usually don't have those guys leave the building. So there's definitely an emphasis there that you have to build from within. And, speaking to Chasten Brown as a player, I mean, I think we all are going to focus on the fact of his just the sheer size of him, 6'8", 6'9", whatever he is exactly. It sounds like he's actually 6'9". And what's crazy, he hasn't even filled out his body yet. That's the thing. It's I think he's been listed at 250, 260 some places. That's really not a lot of weight when you look at the height that he has. And the position that he plays and the position he's going to play at UCF. So I'm excited for him to get into the strength program clearly at UCF, and he's going to have to put on a lot of weight, you would probably imagine, but you would like to think he's still going to be able to be pretty agile. Only played 1 year of high school football. For the district that he was in, I believe he took home the top offensive lineman honors there. So yeah, this is absolutely a big get. And if you look at UCF's recruiting, they're kind of doing what I expected them to do. I'm sure you expected them to do as well. As of now, they have their first and average player rating in the entire conference. And they have a top 25 class now. I think that's pretty much consensus across all of the recruiting networks at the moment. So they're doing what you expected them to do. And I think there's still a really good shot that they could end up landing the number 1 class in the Big 12 this cycle.
Yeah, there's some names that haven't committed yet that I would assume UCF is really high on their list. So, and again, I'm expecting Kendarius Reddick to decommit at some point to go to USC. So that will hurt the ranking a little bit. But like I said, I know there's a lot of players that haven't committed yet that UCF is high on the list and will bump that rating up. But I think it's big time for UCF. I think it's big time for the way that they have been recruiting the Big 12. And I'll say this, and I was talking to you off air about it, and I think it's a larger discussion, but UCF has 19 commits so far in this class. I'm sure they're going to be over 20 by the time we're all done with it. If you go back and you look at Gus Malzahn's previous recruiting classes, I think the largest one he had was 17 or 18. So he's already surpassed all of his previous recruiting classes. And this will be, like I said, it's a much larger discussion for an episode probably closer to the season about how crucial this season is for UCF and for Gus Malzahn. There seems to be I don't know if desperation is the right word, but maybe it is. There seems to be this desperation that even in Big 12 Media Day, when they were asking Coach about certain games or this season, he highlighted the Florida one, and he said not because of the game, but because of recruiting. He talked about bringing in agile defensive players, playmakers, and you brought in basically a bunch of seniors. Or if you did bring in a younger guy, it was a guy that had a really phenomenal season last year. So it seems to me, Nick, that the emphasis of, you haven't really seen him get this many freshmen. He's adding probably the most freshmen he's ever had. The emphasis is we need to win this year so that we can get, they're already recruiting at a high level, but I think they're viewing it as we need to be somewhere in that top 15.
Yeah.
Top 20 even, recruiting every single year. And this is going to be the year to do it. If you can beat Florida, if you can win 9 games, hell, go to a conference championship or get in the 12-team playoff, you're on a trajectory of top 15 team every year.
I mean, it's sort of what everybody's trying to do is obviously add to the portal and guys who can help you win now. But at the same time, trying to, sort of marriage that to your future and what you can do at the high school. I mean, everybody's doing that except for probably, Clemson, right? Because they just will not touch the portal. But I think we've kind of talked about it. There's still a big risk reward when it comes to the transfer portal. Certainly, we've talked a lot about the quarterback position. And Gus says, he hitched his wagon to John Rice Plumlee, and now he's hitched it to KJ Jefferson, which we know is only going to be a 1-year sort of stopgap move. And then it's like, are we going to go back into the portal again? Or we've recruited that position heavily now. So you like to think you got somebody in-house, but even at running back, the top 2 horses, RJ Harvey and Panay Boone, transfers. You look at the receiver position, they just sent Javon Baker to the NFL. He was a transfer. Kobe Hudson is now in that room, transfer. It's been a lot of the guys who have been the impact players on this team, at least on the offensive side of the football, have come way of the transfer portal. So again, you don't necessarily want to live and die by that. And I mean, as much as college football changes, the top teams that are consistently winning year in and year out, and we all know who they are, they typically rank in the top 10, top 5, whatever, of high school recruiting. You have to do your part there. And I think Gus Malzahn, clearly he continues to stack up the best classes we've seen in UCF history. But if you're going to take it to that next level, continuing to emphasize high school recruiting and getting even better classes. And like you said, now they're at 25, I think right now nationally. Eventually you want to see them start getting inside the top 20. And hopefully the success will follow. And of course, there's a lot of things that go into that from a development standpoint. But I definitely agree with the process there, because now that we're, year 4 of Gus Malzahn, it's time to start moving a little bit. And I think he understands that.
No, for sure. And I also, for all the people that are going to go around in the comments, I understand also there's a new age where there's going to be maybe a third of your players from the previous recruiting class that might enter the portal after this season. I'm very well aware of the transfer portal, and that's also probably adding more freshmen. But at the same time, there also is, it's not an anomaly that he is adding more freshmen than he ever has. There's clearly an emphasis on we don't want to have to hit the portal every single season for certain positions. We want to be able to have backups on backups of guys that we recruited that we can build up and get playing time. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the depth guys on UCF's roster right now are guys that UCF recruited that are just waiting for an opportunity.
Yeah, and even a lot of the guys, at least on last year's team, I think we had talked about it, there was a lot of players on that roster who just quite simply were not Power 5 players. They just weren't. And when you had to substitute and rotate, you would see sometimes there was a big fall off there. Whereas, and I know this is probably a bad example because, again, this is coming directly from the portal, but we had talked about this off air. It's like, hey, if RJ Harvey needs a spell, here comes Panay Boone. And is there going to be a heavy drop off there? No. At least
no, and that's what it gets me excited because, I was telling Nick, I watched the Oklahoma State highlights just because I was, I'm excited for the season. I wanted to see a UCF win, so I watched the highlights. And again, I love Johnny Richardson. I think if you use Johnny Richardson right, he's a really talented back. But bringing in a guy like Penny Boone, when RJ gets a spell and goes off the field, bringing in a guy like Penny Boone is just going to keep this offense. You don't feel like when RJ goes off the field, UCF can't run the football. When RJ goes off the field, UCF is practically the same type of offense. So that's what gets us excited. And again, credit to Gus, credit to the staff. They keep building. Let's see what they can do in the next couple months in the recruiting aspect. But they're doing one hell of a job, and they've been doing. We've talked about this for now going on our 3rd season doing this podcast, which is crazy. every single year when we talk recruiting, it's like, how can it get any better? And they keep doing it. So, all right, that's our UCF of the day. Let's go to the Big 12 because Brett Yormark is making moves. I think he's the best commissioner in college, in my opinion, the way he's handled taking the job and what he's done to kind of navigate. He also has, in my opinion, probably rubbed people the wrong way, but those people are probably the ACC and Pac-12. Most people are loving what he's doing and the way he's trying to be on the forefront of college athletics and trying to be first but not last. So Ross Dellinger, there was a lot of smoke, Nick. A lot of smoke about Florida State and Clemson potentially going to the Big 12 this weekend. Now, again, most of the things that we have heard over the past however many months was Florida State and Florida State and Clemson are trying to go to the SEC or Big 10. More specifically, the Big 10. And if the Big 12 was not even a thought process, the Big 12 might have been a thought process for a school like Miami, for a school like, Virginia Tech, or like some of those schools were probably going to go to the Big 12. Well, Ross Dellinger said that there's definitely been some smoke. He said that there's been some conversations, and I trust Ross Dellinger. Smart, he knows what he's talking about. He is a good reporter, and it wasn't just him. There was a lot of other people that talked about it. Here's why I think why I think it could happen, why I don't think it could happen. Why I think it could happen, I think private equity for FSU is huge. I think FSU's already wanting to get into the private equity space. I think if the SEC and the Big Ten are like, we don't want to add anybody, and you're trying to get a fast way out, the Big 12's open for business, way more stable than the ACC, we can do it. I think same thing for Clemson. That would be an intriguing option. Also, I know you're going to mention it, and I think that this is a wider form discussion. You'll be, again, at least at the start, you're going to be the top dogs in the Big 12. Just like you are in the ACC. You'll go to the Big 12, you'll be the top team, and there's way more competition in the Big 12 than there is in the ACC. Part of the reason why you don't really need to fear that the Big 12 is going to be going bye-bye in 10 years is because the Big 12 will get another TV deal. They'll be secured. They'll be safe. And if you wanted to leave at some point, you have that option, but you could be secured for the next decade plus. The reason why I don't think it'll happen, I think Florida State, my opinion, is set in their ways. They believe themselves as just this higher entity than most college programs, which, again, storied history, storied program. I think they so badly want to go to the SEC or Big 10 that I think they're going to let a good opportunity, like potentially going to the Big 12, fall at their wayside for an opportunity to go to one of the top two conferences. But that's just me. I don't view it as much as Clemson because I think Florida State, again, was the one that kind of started it. They've wanted to go out. Clemson joined along at their hip saying, yeah, we want out too. But I want to give you the floor. I want you to give your spiel. I think this would be great for the Big 12. I think it'd be great for Florida State and Clemson. I just don't think it's going to happen. But if it does, you're setting up the Big 12 for the next decade. It's going to be a Power 3. And it'll already be a Power 3 because once the Big 12 poaches the ACC, it'll still be a Power 3. But that will just secure, I think, right now what the Big 12 is missing, which is powerhouse teams that you can kind of build around.
First of all, I think Florida State has shown the most ambition to get out of the conference clearly because of the lawsuit. I think the playoff snub and everything that happened with that certainly played. I think they were going to do it regardless, but I think that certainly was the final nail in the coffin. But I don't think it's just this is a Florida State endeavor and the rest of the ACC. Like the teams that are going against FSU and what they're saying in the ACC are what? Wake Forest, Pitt. You want to know why? Because they're depending on FSU and Clemson and Miami to get the revenue that they get. That's at the end of the day, that's the reason why those schools are pushing back. Clemson wants out. Miami wants out. North Carolina, I have to think wants out. Virginia Tech, any school in that conference that is interested in remaining competitive and forget college athletics. This is a football conversation, and that's just the driver here. Any of those schools in that conference that has any interest in being competitive in the long term, because of the way college football is moving, and really it's all about the money, wants to get out of that conference. FSU is taking the heat for it right now because of what they're doing. But once they find a way out, the others will certainly filter, and the ACC will eventually die its slow death, or they will place their members with, USF or whatever or whoever. But it's just not going to be. It's going to be what it is, right? So I think that's important to put out there. This is not just a Florida State thing. Now, in regards to the whole Big 12 thing, again, money from a money point, and I had the numbers here based on the tax returns from this past year. The ACC paid out an average of $44.8 million to its football members. The Big 12 came in at $44.2 million, so just slightly under there. But as you had mentioned, the Big 12 TV deal kicks in next year, and Florida State has argued in their lawsuit that it's going to pay them substantially more, the Big 12 members, rather than the ACC members. So that's all true. And we know Big 12 schools are going to get average $31.7 million annually just from those media rights alone. And on top of that, we know that in 2031 or 2030, they're going to be up for media rights again, whereas the ACC has to still wait until 2036. So all that at play, you see why those schools in the ACC that want to remain competitive want to get out. And I do think I was kind of saying it. We talked a little about this last year, just because everybody was just penciling these schools in for the Big 10 or the SEC. I'm like, hey, the Big 12 doesn't really have that bad of a situation if you wanted to create 3 power conferences here. And I'm more open to that, clearly, than just having 2 conferences running the show. Hell, I wish we still had 5 conferences in the whole shebang, but we've already blown that up. So I'd rather have 3 than 2. And from those schools' standpoint, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, they would come into the Big 12 and they would immediately be the schools in the conference. There's really no doubt about that. I mean, I opened today's show saying, who's the face of the conference right now? It's Deion Sanders. And again, for better or worse, that's the thing. That's not even like a singular team. That's just a person. He's a coach. You don't have that team right now that really is so far ahead of the others in regards to being a brand. And if Florida State, Clemson, and Miami came in, well, there's 1, 2, 3, whatever order, you have your brands. And clearly the money that they would rake in from the conference going forward and all the other things with the whole All-State thing, taking over the conference branding, private equity, there would be a real opportunity to be maybe not on par with the other 2 conferences, but you're right there. There's no doubt about it. It wouldn't be like something too drastic. You can still compete. I don't think it changes much. Whereas you stay put in the ACC, I think you're just gonna die a slow death, and you're gonna be punching uphill for a long time. So I do think there's advantages to the Big 12, but to me, the real thing that hurts it, I think, is FSU in particular has done all this stuff with the lawsuit and is going to spend a lot of money to try to get out of this grant of rights deal. And from a perception standpoint, it's a hard sell to probably go, hey, we're going to the Big 12. Regardless of what everything else I said, the Big 12 right now, even though we think they're doing a really good job, from a perception standpoint, they're so far below the top 2 conferences. And I think that would be a hard sell to a lot of people in Tallahassee. It would definitely be a hard sell to the fan base. There's no doubt about that. So those are some of the reasons why I don't think it's going to happen. And like you said, I think Florida State views itself, and I think rightfully so, as a top-tier program and a top-tier brand in college football, and maybe not quite a blue blood, but right in that tier below it. And they're looking at all the teams that they want to remain competitive with. They're in those conferences, and they want to get in there. So I understand why FSU is going to exhaust, and the other schools are going to exhaust every way possible to get in one of those conferences. And I've always said, I think of the 2, the Big 10 seemed more likely than the SEC. I know a lot of people throw out the whole AAU thing with academics and all that. I think that's just nonsense, to be honest with you.
You don't think the Big 10 cares about that?
I just, at the end of the day, we're talking about football here that's going to override all this. And let's not act like, okay, Florida State's not an AAU school. Are we going to act like Florida State has no academic prestige at all? Are we going to act like it's nothing? Like, I think that's a little blown out of proportion. So I think if push came to shove, they would find a way to make it work. So yeah, I do think there's advantages to the Big 12, but like I said, I don't think a lot of it's going to end up mattering because I think that from a perception standpoint, it's a hard sell for them probably.
So here's my thing. I could care. Let me say this a certain way. You are right. Those brands come in, they'll be the number one brands. What I like about the Big 12 compared to the ACC right now, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, right? The Big 12 is creating brands. UCF is a brand that you can look at in 5 years and say, they'll be a brand that people are going to talk about. UCF has been doing that, right? You don't know how it's going to end up. Like, UCF could win 4 games this year, and then everybody forgets about them.
Right.
Florida State, call it like it is, they've had a good 1 year, and they've had really bad years in the last 8, right?
Yeah.
So they had really one good year. And credit to Florida State. I get it. You had really one good year, missed out on the college football playoff. You want more money. Everybody in the ACC wants more money. This deal is awful. And I think this is going to change the way that deals are made because, again, you look at the Big 12, credit to Brett Yormark, makes a deal that's only about 7-8 years, or 6, 7, 8 years, and says we're going to bet on ourselves. We're going to take less money now, and then we're going to come back to the table in 7 years and get a better deal. Right? That's what screwed the Pac-12.
Yeah.
The ACC was like, well, we want to make sure that we're good for the next 2 decades. So we're just going to make this deal now, span it over a long time.
Without having the foresight to see where things were heading. And maybe, listen, maybe we shouldn't fault them because I don't know if any of us saw it coming the way it did.
No.
But certainly locking yourself into a deal like that for however many years it was, 15 years at the time or whatever, was, in hindsight, it was a terrible play.
And we said that. We've been saying this, Nick, since the move, the last year's craziness with the Pac-12. Me and you said on the show, we've been very adamant. The minute that stuff was going on, and the minute we saw how teams were a little wary in the Pac-12, we said, if the Pac-12 goes away, the ACC is next. I've said it. The ACC is dead on arrival. I've been saying that for years because I said these teams aren't going to sit by and watch conferences like the SEC, Big 10, and Big 12 make billions of dollars more than the ACC.
Right.
They're just not going to do it. These teams at some point are going to be like, well, why don't I go and do what Oregon, Washington, Colorado, why am I not going to do what they do?
And like I said, they want to compete. And they've competed in the past and everything, and you're not going to sit back and watch college football pass them by and pass them over. It's so funny when you think about it. Like, we make out the SEC and the Big Ten to be these murderer rows of conferences, and yes, they are. But we forget, Vanderbilt exists in that equation, Indiana exists in that equation, and the Northwesterns of the world and their Purdue's. And I'm not putting any of these schools down. I'm just saying,
no, but it's honest.
They have years where they flex their muscles, but in terms of sustained, competing and all that kind of stuff, they're not there. But guess what? They're in the right place at the right time, and you can't really remove them from the equation. So guess what? They get to play, and they know, by the way, they're not going to compete. Like, none of this has made it any better if you're Vanderbilt or Mississippi State or Indiana or none of these schools.
It means you'll get a paycheck.
You're getting a paycheck. But you're still signing up to the fact that you are still the worst in your conference. And it's still going to be even harder now for you to compete. But guess what? You're in the game.
But that's why, again, and I don't want to get too far deep, but if you're Florida State or Clemson, and hell, even the other ACC schools, you're looking at, like, no offense, if you go into the SEC or the Big Ten, yeah, it's going to be tough. Like, the chance of you winning the national championship is low. I mean, you get the best recruits, you're still competing against all the other top teams. You come to the Big 12, again, you don't look at the Big 12 and say, wow, they're top heavy. No, you're looking at 16. The Big 12 this year, you can make an argument for probably 9 out of 10 teams to win the Big 12.
Yeah,
and wouldn't you want that?
And it's it's sort of the problem with the Big 12 in a way, is they have a lot of depth, but I fear what's going to happen. I know this is sort of a separate conversation, but I'm going to say it anyway. I fear what's going to happen this year, Sean, is you're going to have that team that wins the Big 12, And I don't know if you're going to get another team in that playoff, because I think there's such, like you said, there's 9 or 10 teams that are all very sort of evenly matched, and I feel like they might end up cannibalizing themselves, is what's going to end up happening.
But I think that's going to be one of the college football playoff committee members or something, or I forgot who was at the Big 12 Media Day. I'll find it interesting because I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of teams with probably 3 losses.
Yeah, and by the way, the other schools could cannibalize themselves too, but it's going to be different, because if you're comparing a 3-loss SEC school to a 3-loss Big 12 school, you're losing that fight every single time.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. And we'll see how it all shakes out. You're talking about, again, it all determines, again, does a UCF team that beat Florida and beats Utah get in with 3 losses? Does a Utah team that wins the Big 12, who's the next on that chopping block? Is it Kansas State? Does a 2-loss Kansas State team get in? These are all questions we're going to have answered in the first year. I like that they're not just saying we're going to hop to 14 teams. We want to see how the 12 team works first. But again, we've said it over the last however many. It's a weird time in college athletics, specifically college football. I think whatever happens, even if Clemson and Florida State don't go to the Big 12 is going to be, at least for the near future, fine. Because all the other ACC schools, and I know ACC fans don't want to hear this, the Big 12 turned SMU down. The Big 12 didn't want SMU.
SMU joined the ACC, and they're not even getting paid.
They took $0. That's how desperate they were, because the Big 12 said, we don't want you. The Big 12 didn't want Stanford. They didn't want Cal. I know that's hard for ACC fans to understand, but
yeah, all those moves did, Stanford and Cal specifically, was raise the ACC's academic prestige. I mean, what else do they value do they add to the ACC?
And you're screwing all your other sports, which I'm sure all the ACC teams love, because it's we're going to have to go across the country to play games. We're going to have to go to Texas to play teams just to find a neutral site. These teams see how messed up this is becoming. So if I'm a
it doesn't matter anymore. We have situations where Rutgers is going to play USC. I mean, and
it's
about the travel there. I mean, it's just what it is.
Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting. I think at the end of the day, regardless, the ACC is dead. It's been dead. It's going to be dead at some point, and the Big 12 will be there to scoop up the teams that they want. It might not be.
Yeah, and even if it's not those 3 schools, like I said, the next tier of ACC, because I think the first tier is clearly Florida State, Clemson, Miami.
But Miami, you can make the argument, and I know we're going off, Hal, but think about it. Okay, the SEC they're not going to take Florida State and Miami. Florida won't allow it, and the schools won't want another Florida team. Okay, the Big Ten. The Big Ten's not going to take 2 schools. And the SEC's not just going to take 1. They're going to take 2 if they take 2. So you can make the argument Miami will get left out. And then it's their only option will be the Big 12. They're not going to take Florida State and Miami.
Right. And I think the important thing here, it's the SEC, by adding Oklahoma and Texas, was almost did they need Oklahoma and Texas?
No, they're
probably
we're
not.
done.
But that was just continue to add. And then now that they're at that point, I mean, they're, it's, I'm trying to find a good example, but the Avengers, I guess, I don't know. They're already just stacked to the gills. They don't need to add anything necessarily. The Big Ten, with the additions they made, they probably think we don't need necessarily to add anything. Whereas the Big 12, I think clearly, I would use that word, needs to add as big of a school they can't. But if it's not those 3, I mean, clearly you're looking at the North Carolinas of the world and how, Duke kind of fits into that, because it's hard to think of those 2 being broken up. I don't know. But even the teams to me that have shown the willingness to compete in football, like NC State, Virginia Tech, those types of schools to me that would follow. And Louisville's, I mean, some of the world's. I mean, there's still some quality ads there for sure. And I think those 100%. Would end up filtering to the Big 12.
Again, a lot can happen. It's going to be very interesting.
At the end of the day, UCF is, again, happy that we got ahead of this. in 2021. Whereas,
I mean, and this is the issue. Like,
could you imagine if UCF was still sitting in the AAC right now?
Oh, no offense, and I've said this, and it sucks. Like, we've said it, I hate it. I hate the group of 5 schools. It's like, basically, you have no shot now. But besides SMU, because do we really count SMU? They said, we'll go for $0. Like, I don't count them. If you're in the ACC right now, or AAC, or a group of 5, you're screwed. I mean,
yeah,
because you're basically saying, okay, they're hoping, like, and this is where I don't think, and again, what else are you going to do? But when American Athletic Conference commissioner, or the ADs and stuff are like, oh, well, if Florida State wants to make that move, or Clemson wants to make that move, like, we'll be ready for the ACC to pick it up. It's like, I don't think you comprehend USF or Memphis. I don't think you are comprehending when those schools leave, the Dukes, the North Carolinas, the Miamis of the world are going to say, you know what? Let's stay here and let's add Memphis and USF and make the same amount of money, but know in our next TV contract, we're going to take a significant dip because we don't have to. Like,
right, and this
they're not
is why,
putting those together. They're thinking we're going to go to the ACC. It's like nobody packed up and went to the Pac-12.
And this is the unfortunate part.
It sucks.
I know this is a UCF podcast, but just to bring USF up because I'm here in Tampa, so I'm familiar with a little bit with everything there.
Yeah,
it's the unfortunate part, but at the same time, not because they didn't prioritize this earlier enough.
Did it himself.
Is that they finally have the stadium coming, the indoor facility, like all the things they needed to be doing years ago, but they were so focused on academics and not realizing, hey, we probably need to worry about athletics because that's the meal ticket for our university. And the unfortunate part is now they're getting all that, but there's nowhere to turn. Like, in terms of growth, like, do I think USF is at the front of the line probably in the AAC?
Yep.
Because of all the things I just mentioned? Yeah.
Yep.
I do. But cool, the answer to that's the ACC, but without those 3, 2, whatever you want to call it, whatever you consider Miami, without those schools there, what is the ACC's value? And that's the unfortunate part, and that's why, to bring it full circle to UCF, a blessing to even have the on-campus stadium. I know the on-campus stadium gets, crapped on a lot because of it's just a rinky-dink little thing there and whatnot, and it looks like it could fall apart at any moment. It gets crap for it, but it does its job, and it's on stadium, and it's there, and they have this whole project going on, and where they're upgrading everything. Like, they got out ahead of that, and then they had success at the right time. And that's why UCF kind of jetted to the front of the line. And realistically, that probably should have been USF. And that's the misstep. So,
yeah,
that's why we're here.
When you look at it, I mean, because BYU was an independent, but when you look at it, UCF, Houston, Cincy, SMU, and BYU are the only quote unquote group of 5 schools that, as of right now, got the invite, and now it's become the interchanging of Power 4 teams now. So if that day comes, I hope it doesn't. Like, I want to make it very clear. I don't hope, and I've said this before, I don't want the ACC to die. I don't want the thing that happened to the Pac-12 to happen again.
I think it's sad the Pac-12 has 2 schools sitting in it with just no direction.
No, like, it's sad. Like, it sucks. But it's like Brett Yormark said it, like, you either move along, move ahead, and figure out the best way to basically stay alive, or you die. And unfortunately for the ACC, it just doesn't look good. And it's like, for all these group of 5 teams, though I would love for them, not really USF, but for the Memphises of the world, and for some people that, like, you just don't have hope. Like, for you, if I was in that situation.
Heck, I wish USF would join the Big 12, would get into the Big 12. That way we could because I just think it's a crime that we can't play them every year. I think it's a crime that these rivalries are gone. So if there was a way they could just get into the Big 12, it would be awesome from that standpoint. But
I think if there's a pecking order, and clearly USF is not on that pecking order right now.
Right. The problem is all these ACC schools are ahead of them in that pecking order.
But this is the problem, right? Like, we're talking about, okay, where is USF more likely to go, the Big 12 or the ACC? And this is why any ACC person saying, oh, ACC is number 3 and all this, it's not true. Because you're talking about USF will be admitted to the league if these guys go. The Big 12's like, we don't want them. They're way far down the line. Like, they won't, no offense, there's a reason USF is not there. If USF got to the college football playoff this year and next year, I still don't think they're going to the Big 12. Because I think, again, the Big 12 right now is looking for Power 4 programs that are already Power 4 teams that they can assert their dominance into the Big 12. And the ACC is looking at the group of 5 programs. Because, again, no offense, no team from the Big 12, SEC, or Big 10 is going to hitch their wagon to the ACC right now.
Right.
The ACC is looking at the next group of 5 crop and saying, how can we do what the Big 12 did and make sure we're alive like the Big 12? The only difference is the Big 12 had a media rights deal coming up. The ACC doesn't. And that's a big, unfortunate circumstance of this whole ordeal.
If the ACC had a different media rights sort of timeline, then things would be different.
Yep. It'll be interesting. I think, Nick, the next month and a half is going to be very similar to last year, where there's going to be a lot of noise surrounding the 2 schools in the ACC and then the 7 schools in the ACC.
Well, you know what I just cannot wait for is the last week of August or first week of September, and we're done talking about it. We put it in the vault for the next 4 months, 5 months after that, and we don't talk about it. Don't talk about it again.
Last week of August, coming up sooner than we think.
Right.
Only about a month or so away.
I think we're 7 weeks away. We're 7 weeks away from the opener.
Well, and if you think about it, it's like 6, because next week with college football 25, it's like that whole week's going to go by so quick because you're just going to play the game the entire time. And you feel like you got college football. And then once August is here, you've got training camp, fall camp. So it's like...
Yeah. Now, I have to tell you, the game coming out and everything, I feel like the big winner here, other than us, the fans, is the PlayStation and Xbox. What is it? Who runs Xbox? Microsoft, right?
Microsoft, yeah.
PlayStation is Sony. So Sony and Microsoft are big winners because I know so many of my friends that don't even have the new consoles anymore.
That are buying them.
That are literally buying them now, with the intention to only play this game. And I have to think that is for so many people. I'm watching people, like, at least on Twitter, just like people who cover the sport that are like in their 30s and 40s that are talking about playing the game. And I'm like,
it's awesome.
It's just crazy, like how many this has touched this game, the return of it.
Well, that's why I wanted to be one of the first to say I'm doing a UCF Dynasty for all our UCF fans, because I'm like, listen, I'm always that guy that, like, when I'm watching that, I'm like, oh, is he going to do a UCF thing? Or is he going to do like an Orlando Magic thing? And it never happens. So I'm like, you know what? Screw that. I'm going to have the game. Now, I did have to spend some money on a couple extra stuff that I did not have. We've been testing out some stuff. I'm trying to give the best quality content. We'll have to get you down here to record some episodes. Because, yeah, it's different. It's a little different, but it's going to be cool. All right, Nick. Any final thoughts? Longest episode in a while, which I said before it was going to be. But usually when we get into these conversations, we typically go
I was going to say, I enjoy it because we had something that we could really, sink our teeth into and research and all that kind of stuff. So I enjoyed it. I hope everybody watching enjoyed it as well, as we push closer here to the beginning of the season. So, and it's been a big month, like you said, as we started with on the recruiting trail, and I believe that's going to continue.
It's an exciting month. Almost there. Almost there. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. As always, like I said, new series drops next Wednesday. We'll still have a charge on next Friday. As always, we don't stop. We're too close to stop. So please, like, subscribe, comment, share. Do all that you do. We greatly appreciate it. What's your thought? Give us your take on this whole Big 12 ACC situation. I feel like we've been talking about it for way too long, so give your thoughts down below. Everybody, this has been Charge On, presented by BetOnline. We will see you next week.